Green Acres. In 1999, I made the decision to leave my Long Island hometown behind for the greener pastures of central New York State. By that time, Long Island had become way overpopulated and overdeveloped for my taste. So I always remembered fondly my weekend camping trips in Delaware County over the years, and that's where I headed. Shortly before that move, I did join a cat rescue group in Nassau County and got involved helping with feral cat trapping, and it was a very rewarding and educational experience. I learned about not only trapping, but also a lot about animal behavior. So when I settled into my new digs upstate in Andes, New York, I planned to continue the same mission there. So I first went to the general store owner and asked him if there were any rescue efforts similar to that already going on. And he looked at me with surprise and said, yes, Diane, the cat lady, has been trapping cats here for years all by herself. So I said, okay. So with that, I called Diane the next day and a new friendship began and we worked together. Eventually, we were able to get some other stray animal lovers to join us, and we went ahead and named that group the Andes Cat Team, ACT for short. So after some years, I moved from there to a more rural farm property in Otsego County, and I had stopped my efforts pretty much at that point because I had my hands full with the 3 dogs and 5 cats I already had personally adopted from my work. So what I did was, I'll show you that I have a duplicate. These are the 2 cats that still live with me. It's years later, but they're still alive and they still live with me. So by this time in 2005, I had also come across pretty much any of the wildlife that the area offered, everything from deer to bobcat and even a bear sighting once. But none of these could have prepared me for the experience I had at my own property with one wild animal. One morning when I went to the back door to let my dogs out, I noticed there was something out there about the size of a cat. I could just see the outline. But I got a closer look and I realized it was a woodchuck. So with that, I thought, he's at my back door. Let me try to shoo him away. And I did wave my arms, but to no avail. It just stood there looking at me. Right then, I started thinking that it seemed awfully tame, and I got really close to panicking because one of the things I had learned about animal behavior is that rabies sometimes has a sign or symptom that includes unusual friendliness. So I figured, okay, that must be it. Now I'm really worried. So I thought, well, who am I ever going to get to help me take care of this? So I immediately thought of the authorities. So I gave the police a call. And they told me they were very busy, and they asked me, is the animal still in my view? And I said, at that time it wasn't. And they said, okay, call us back when it is. So with that, I hung up. Then I decided I didn't really want to wait any longer than I had to. So I remembered that my house painter, Mark, was an avid hunter. So I gave him a call and explained the situation, and he was very obliging to me. He said that he would come right over with his new .45 and be glad to test it out should the situation warrant it. So with that I hung up, and shortly after he came over, but all the while I was thinking, I'm not a murderer, I'm not a murderer. It had to be, though, either the woodchuck or us. So when Mark arrived, we sat in the backyard for over an hour watching for the woodchuck to reappear, which it didn't do. With that, he left saying, give me a call if you see him again. And I thanked him as he drove off. With this, I gave a sigh of, oh my gosh. So by this time I'm getting pretty unsettled about the whole thing. And with that, I hear my neighbor pulling into the front driveway. And as Teresa gets out of the car, we both look over toward my shed and we see the woodchuck now laying on a wooden bench outside of my tool shed. So with that, I gasped and I told her, "Be careful, get away. It's friendly, so it must be rabid." So by then, the woodchuck was already at her feet sniffing her shoe. And she says, "Wait, maybe it's somebody's pet woodchuck." At that point, I really tried to hide my feelings and impatience around that reply. But I said, "Look, I really think you should get away." And she said, "Well, I could swear I heard that somebody on the road once had a pet woodchuck." And I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah." And with that, she got in the car and she ran up to the next residence where Kurt lived and shortly returned with Kurt and his father, Ralph. They walked up to me and they were holding photos. And Ralph showed me the photos, the top one having a woodchuck in it, and said to me, "Did it look like this?" I said, "Of course it did." And we all laughed. Ralph would ever insinuate that not all woodchucks looked alike. So with that, the next photograph showed Kurt petting the woodchuck. Then I said, "Okay, what happened with that?" So Kurt informed us that one night he was driving home late along his road and something was crossing, and it turned out to be a mother woodchuck with two woodchuck babies in her mouth, and he hit them, and only the one baby woodchuck survived, and then he committed to raising it at that point and naming it Woody, you might have guessed. As a matter of fact, I'll send these around. These are pictures.
It's Woody.
Yup. So with this, I gave a sigh of relief that now there was no rabid woodchuck and then there was no dead pet woodchuck. That was close, I thought to myself. Meanwhile, Kurt returned a little later with a pet carrier and lots of bait to coax Woody back into the cage so he could take him back home. It worked very quickly. He brought Woody back home, and later that night I caught up with all of them on their property. And what I saw was this tame little guy happily engaging with all the other 2- and 4-legged residents of the property. And you can see that too in the photos. This is just one of many experiences I've had upstate, which leads me wholeheartedly to agree with Oliver Wendell Douglas that Green Acres is the place to be.